Welcome back to another SCX24 build, and you guessed it, it's finally a Deadbolt. So this is a new one to my stable. This is one I got several months ago as a gift, and it was my kind of test fit truck for the Mofo brass portals. So those are still on there. So that kind of changed the original direction of this truck, which was going to be an LCG kind of belly dragger with brass axles. But I think I'm going to leave these portals on there, but continue to make it an LCG chassis. Try to get it as low as I can on those axles. And you can see here I've started already with this body and trying to get this guy lowered down. So the first piece of that replaced the back hinge mount with one that I ordered off of Shapeways. And that piece lowers the hinge point, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 millimeters. So that drops the rear. So then I got this Bauhaus RC LCG kit to go with it. And you can see here's the battery tray for that, which I'm not going to use on this. I'm just using the front ESC/battery tray as the battery tray. And you can see I've further modified it here at each of these cylinders with a post go. I've notched them so these can slip all the way in, and I plan on just gluing those down. I don't plan on raising them, so those are as low as they can go, and that gives me about a 3 magnet height. I've got 2 taped down and 1 above, so I think that's going to work out perfectly, and that seems to get it even with the rear. And of course the body was hanging below the frame rails, so I notched the body. And you can see I've trimmed the fenders, I've taken out depth on the side panels as well, just to thin this whole thing up. And you can see this big section of the grille is gone, and headlights. And I plan on doing some Baja kind of style lights there. That's something that I had in mind from the beginning. Similar to what I did on the rock bouncer here, although the whole bumper is inverted, but it will be the same kind of situation. So that'll be my front lighting there, nice and tucked up to the body, and the body will be notched around the wires coming off the back. So that should give me a nice low pro body. So that's kind of where we're starting here. And here's the little magnets I'm using, which are great because you can just stack as needed to get more height. And they're super thin, so it's really nice. And of course, test fitted the receiver and was looking at some mounting spots for electronics. Since this does not have inner fenders, I'm going to put in some little side trays that mount off of the side of the transmission. So they're not sliders, but they will come out basically to the body and give me a platform on each side for electronics. So that may allow me to totally remove this rear battery tray and just have electronics and battery all kind of forward bias. So that's kind of where we're starting here. I didn't want to get too far along before I kind of did an update here, but fitting this clear body is super nice, super easy, because you can see right through it, and it's really helpful to get clearances and get everything aligned. So in doing that, it requires kind of starting the build a little bit. And speaking of that, rather than jumping right to painting, I think I'm going to go ahead and put on some suspension components and potentially some wheels and tires, just to see kind of where our front fender rub is, how good we are, and if we need more trim before paint. Here we go. Some nice blue shocks from NHX. So I've never used their shocks. So these are 32 millimeter stock length with some different springs. So we'll try those out. That may give you some idea of the paint scheme. I won't reveal that yet. So to pair with those, I ordered up the original KINETIC double barrel conversion from KINETIC KMS off of eBay, and I ordered his very light pressure springs, which are insanely awesome. So those are going on the rear for sure. They may go on the front with limiters, we'll see. I may leave the front just the stock length. So in doing that, it's like I might as well put on the high clearance 4-link kit. So if I do that, it kind of snowballs on me. So transmission skid, 4-link servo brass adjustable tray from Mofo with the aluminum posts. If I'm putting in that, might as well go ahead and get the motor mounted up. So I've got a Nano Beast V2 in the box with the center mount. Finish off that servo tray with the black label servo from Mofo RC, one of his aluminum servo horns, and then his brass steering links. So that ought to add a little bit of front bias weight as well. And then you can see here, I've got the wheels that I originally kind of test fit on here, these ultra premium wheels from Mofo RC with the interchangeable hubs. So I had the 3mm, I bought the 6, which I was going to use with the brass axle version to get a wide track. But since I'm doing portals, I think I'm going to rob these 0 offset hubs off of the actual portal wheels and try them on these and just see where those sit. And I can always fall back to these portal wheels if I need to. But I have to get some tires on there. You can see I robbed the IROCs off the wheels, using those on a different build. So I may fit up some scramblers just for a big tire to really check the fenders. Not sure what tire I'm going to run on there yet, but that'll give us something to kind of check front turning fender clearances on probably the most extreme size tire. So anyways, adding a little suspension turned into adding a lot of suspension. So let's just jump in and get this thing done. Here's a quick shot of the disassembled shock. So if you've never taken one of these apart, it's super easy. You just remove the blue cap, and then you can remove the blue collar, slide off the spring, and then you take a 1.5mm driver and you can unscrew this bolt that threads through to the bottom, and then you've got it fully disassembled. So we're going to replace the existing threaded collar with this KINETIC, and then we're going to add this brass inner shaft, and this is the very light pressure spring. So we will rebuild that and I'll show it to you momentarily. Alright, so here we are fully assembled. Here's the stock link. So what's nice about these KINETIC, they can actually compress smaller than the 32mm. And then of course you get more extension. And these are the very light pressure springs. And I think what comes in these is the firmer set. The black ones are the softer. So anyways, there you go. Super quick and easy to set these up. So I'm going to build the other 3. Alright, I've got this UPW mounted up with a scrambler. So you can kind of see the offset of the, I guess, +0 hub that I installed versus the stock rim. So it still sits out a little bit more than the stock, but I'm okay with that. Much better than the +3. And you can see the nice contact patch here. I didn't vent the tire. These aren't vented, so I did swap the foams out. And I use these Crawler Innovations microfoams. You can see how wide they are. So I cut one in half, and this is a scrambler foam. You see the diameter. This is a much smaller diameter, a little bit wider, but much softer. So if you put that on there, there's no deflection on that foam. If you set it on there, you can see it's a good way to tell the density of the foam. So this is a much softer foam. So even without being vented, this is very soft. It's got a lot of give to it. So I think I'm going to mount up the other side, and I may go ahead and finish up the links and servo tray, kind of this front end, just to double check. But it looks like there's a contact patch down in that bottom corner. So there may be a little more trimming, but before we get there, I may just install everything and just double check it, just to be sure. But so far it's starting to shape up, look pretty good. There's one other thing I'll show you before we move on. This rear suspension, played with that and ended up moving both of the shock towers forward. So they're in these two holes, and there's an open hole behind it. So I believe this is where they mount for the Jeep body. That way I could use the upper mount for actually the body post, but instead of the shock leaning back, the shock's leaning forward. And you can see I've got compression all the way down. So I'm basically at my bump stop with my shock, and my diff is hitting the hinge mount. So that's about as good as it can get right there. And even with those VLP shocks or springs in there, I'm getting a little bit of lift out of them, and they may break in. I may set some weight on them. I mean, they are super soft, but you can see I'm still getting a little bit of a lift out of them, which is not bad. It's basically got me sitting level, but I could put limit straps on the front and rear and just try to tuck it down, basically full droop. But I guess that'll be something we evaluate later towards the end. But anyways, just wanted to show you that little tweak to the rear end. Played with them here, and you know, once you lean them, you don't get any use out of your shock. I mean, you get tons of flex, but actually putting them up here with the telescoping, I didn't lose any flex at all, and it helped level the body. If I leaned them forward to here, this whole back end just dropped. So I think that's where I'm gonna at least start with the suspension for this guy. So I think now we'll move on and get everything else kind of mounted up. Well, a little bit of progress. We got two front wheels on, and I ended up tweaking the rear suspension a little bit. Look at that. Look how smooth that is. So I took off the O-rings on the outside on the wider flange on all four corners, and then I was still getting a little bit of binding even having these loose. So I used spacers, and so I've got one spacer at the top and two spacers at the bottom. So we can get a better shot here of this. But that allows those shocks to stay straight and not bind at all. So initially I had two spacers at the top, one at the bottom, and I realized it was really, I was getting bind on the opposite side, not on the compression side here. So I swapped and did two at the bottom to kick that bottom out to keep it straight. And you can see there, it's keeping it straight. And this compressed one is easier to keep straight because it's short. You're really worried about those long ones. So people always complain about the KINETIC shocks binding, but they're just not setting them up correctly. They can't bend over that length when they're extended, or they will bind. So something to know. All right, back with 4 tires on here. Got super free articulation, no binding, and I've got a nice 4 tire plus flex here. Get a little more on there. So that's looking pretty good right off the bat. That wide track is really helping the articulation as well as these KINETIC shocks. So now I think it's time to look at the servo tray, kind of front axle linkage. So I've got kind of the steering parts laid out here. And if you're not familiar with this Mofo servo tray, this has got to be the best tray on the market. And you can see all the post holes on the side. So you can get this tray in aluminum or brass. This is the brass one. And then here's your servo posts. So you can see you can adjust these forwards or backwards. And the top surface is flat. Both holes are threaded, so you can 4-link if you want to. You've got plenty of space here in the middle. So this is just perfect. It allows any large servo to just sit over the top, forwards or backwards. So I'm kind of pinched by this LCG tray at an angle here that's kind of pinching the back of the servo, and then I'll have the bumper pinching the front. So we'll see. I may not have a lot of room to go forwards or backwards. I may just be finding kind of the middle ground that works. But we'll see. This black label's a little bit longer than the stock servo. And then I've got this aluminum horn I'll put on there. So I've got my links out, and I did dig out some Injora brass diff covers. So I think I'll put one of those on the front at least. And I think that's where we are. We're gonna move forward and see if we can't get all this installed. All right, quick update here. Got the servo fitted, and you can see I had to clearance the bottom of the frame on each side. And then I also took off kind of the top of those servo tabs. And had to fit this several times, but I ended up having to push it all the way forward, then add 3 spacers. So I used a really long screw. So that gets me basically this back edge as far forward as I can get it on this slanted tray. So the back edge hits right about the front of that slot, which is the battery strap. So I'm gonna get it back in, and we'll double check everything and make sure we've got full compression. Okay, here it is installed. I had to trim out a little more of the frame just because of those spacers. But got the servo centered up, and the moment of truth. We are clear. And then you can see the servo sits right at the tray, and that puts us right here on the front, and it's almost at full compression. I mean, it's super close. If it wasn't for the back edge of that servo hitting. And then we've got clearance to swing in with that notch. That's what that's for. When you're kicked like this and you swing in, that's going to catch. So that works out well. So I think that kind of wraps up this front end. So I think I'm going to check for clearances on the body, and then see maybe if I can't get a little bit of paint on it, since the weather's nice. So moving right along. All right, got the body on, trimmed up. These came in the mail in the meantime from Grizzly Works RC, these frame trays. So you can see I've got one installed right there, and perfect with the fender trim, full compression, full lock with the scrambler. So that's right there on the body edge, and it misses that frame tray. So those will be perfect to mount the electronics on. So I have one on each side. I'm not going to install the other one yet because I've got to switch out this whole motor transmission assembly. But I think I'm ready to mask and paint. Well, I only got a little bit of painting done, unfortunately. This actually took me a little bit longer than expected to get a good coat under there, and I actually had to take a brush and get like deep in the seats and in the steering wheel, and on the kind of the edge there. I couldn't get any spray really down in those little crevices. And then I had a little seepage, and I cleaned that up with an X-Acto. You can see there, pretty hard to tell where it was. So hopefully the other paint coats will cover that. So it's still got the outer cover on there, and I will re-tape it to finish it up. So in the meantime, since the weather's gotten cold, can't paint directly, so I decided to start tearing down and go ahead and get the motor and electronics in. So you can see I've got the Nano Beast V2 here, this little guy, which is a little bit longer than the V1, which is here. You can see the length difference there. So it should be a little more power, a little more torque as well with that size difference. And then one tweak that I'm going to do, I haven't done before, I'm going to replace the brass idler pinion with the nylon he offers now. So I'm just going to try that nylon and see if it's a little quieter. So I've got all my pieces here and my motor plate mounted up. So pretty easy install. Two these flatheads need to lock tight through here into the motor. Then you've got your idler screw, and then you've got your cover screws. So I'm gonna go ahead and get this assembled and potentially get this guy running, and then have to come back and finish up the paint and body work at the last. All right, here we are with the complete chassis. So I've got that motor and transmission installed. I've got the transmission skid, a nice blue to match the shocks. Got the Grizzly Works RC plastic electronics trays on each side of the frame. So ready to go there. And I went ahead and removed the battery tray and just put in one of these aluminum spacer bars. You can get that from the Rock Racer kits, or Mofo RC sells those as well. Of course, I got the rest of the high clearance links on the rear, and I went ahead and put an Injora brass diff on the rear axle. And something I didn't mention on that front as well, but I had to remove both O-rings from the worm gears, otherwise they were too tight, and also had to kind of back off the screws just a little bit. And I had both axles removed so I could kind of hold the worm gear and free spin it to check it. And I recommend doing that just to make sure you don't have any binding. But you know, you just free spin it and then kind of back the screws off a little, check it again. But they're all nice and free spinning now, so there should be no binding or anything. Same thing with the motor transmission. I checked that off the truck. Seems like everything's going to be good, so I think we're ready to finish this out. And because the weather's changed, I think I'm going to go ahead and be able to finish painting. So due to brevity, I think I'm going to split this video, and this will be stage one, and we will complete the bodywork, electronics, and lighting. Finish this guy out in stage two. So thanks for watching, and stay tuned.